to be able to move forward on some of our long-term goals, which are more transparency, better information for you, more efficiency in processes. And so we ask you to continue to be patient with us as we move through these transitions, but also hope you'll take a moment to celebrate some of our successes. It's been quite a few years. We've had a lot of transition and moving parts in the last little while, and so we're almost there. We're pretty excited about it. So really quickly, I'm not going to spend, can I have that mic? Because I'm going to strangle myself with this thing. Makes me feel more like a rock star. Okay. I'll trip, I know. Okay, so really quickly, I know that most of you probably already got information pertaining to, my cell phone isn't gonna help me right now. You probably already got information pertaining to the summary that we put out every year. This is what it looks like. We didn't print them. You can download this off of our website. It's the 2018 General Session Summary. This link will be in the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint should already be up on our website, so we'll show you where that is. So if you go over here, there's a few resources. This 2018 session of the Public Education Summary, this is the bill book, as we call the bill book or the capital book. This has a summary of funding at the beginning, and then it also has a breakout of all the bills that we're going to talk about today. So this is just a good resource, obviously. If you want to know what the actual bill said, reading the actual bill is the best place to go. But this is largely our interpretation of what kind of actions you as LEAs may have to take, or what kind of actions the Board of Education will have to take as we implement these laws. So that's a good resource for you. There's also the budget summary. Jamie is going to bring up where the training is on our website. If you go into the Board of Education and into financial operations, there's a training tab, and all of this information will be posted here. The handout this morning for school level reporting is already up, but we'll post everything this afternoon once we get done with this session. I think you should have already had the documents emailed too. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I'm sure you are already aware of this, but if you go to the financial operations site under minimum school program, you'll see over here on the left-hand side, under 2018-2019, you'll see the total minimum school legislative estimates budget and then the summaries for each of your LEAs. I think you probably have already been using those for months, so this isn't news. But in the event that you didn't know they were out there, they've been posted for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, I think at this point. I'm not sure what day it is, so. Let's see. The RECOD. So I'll go over this really briefly. For those of you who aren't aware, there were 4 bills that were passed during the legislative session. There were 2 House bills and 2 Senate bills that recodified all of 53A, which is the section of statute that governs public education. If you're anything like me, you had all those statutes memorized and now you feel like you're in darkness, not knowing where anything's at. The Legislative Fiscal, or the LRGC, Legislative Research and General Counsel, put together some really cool crosswalks. And we've put those up on the website as well. So if you go back to public policy and public and policy or something, law and policy, the link's on our spreadsheet, so you can get that. Under Utah Education Law Recodified, there's a link to the recodification. There's a link to the master crosswalk and a link to the reverse crosswalk. The reverse crosswalk is my favorite because if you already knew where the statute or rule was, you can just look and see where they moved it. The regular crosswalk is the reverse, obviously. It's the new law, what it is, and then where it used to be. So if you have documents or things that in policies or rules within your own LEA that you need to update or revise, these crosswalks are really an invaluable tool. During the session, they were very valuable to us as we were trying to navigate old and new law. So that's a resource for you. Just something to be aware of. Obviously, here at the board, we have a lot of guiding documents, rules, policies, forms that all reference old statute. We are working to get those updated. We have a couple of temporary law clerks that are working on revising those. You'll see new rules being written and rules being revised in the next few months that update the code references. So just be mindful of that. If you have questions or concerns, please let us know. But those RECOD crosswalks, I pretty much use them every day. So they're quite a helpful tool. Are there any questions on that? Okay. Ding. So I'm going to go through really quickly. Jamie is going to cover all the additions and changes to the minimum school program later. So I actually have to go, but Jamie will take care of those in a few minutes. Really briefly, I just wanted to hit on a couple of things. The WPU value was actually increased 2.5%, which I'm sure you're all aware of. The value of the WPU went from 3311 to 3395. That, in addition to other funding that was provided during the legislative session, added about $268 million into the minimum school program. That's quite a substantial amount of money, which is a great thing for public education. We anticipate we'll have to create about 20 new board rules. There were 4 new programs to implement, 3 new reports, and I think I have a couple more grant programs than is summarized here, but there's a few new grant programs and transition to grant programs. Really quickly, just kind of an overall, our To From Transportation program, there was a $4 million added to that. That largely impacts our districts. Digital Teaching and Learning, there was $10 million ongoing, I believe, that was added to the Digital Teaching and Learning program. And that's distributed to all LEAs based on applications and approval. Schools for the Deaf and the Blind received ongoing $1.7 million. Well, there's some ongoing and one time in there. That largely encompasses their increase to their steps and lanes in the new campus to serve students in the south end of the valley. One of the new grant programs is the Elementary Counselors Program. There's $2.1 million added to this grant program. This will be an application program. Our staff are currently working on the implementation of that. That will enable some matching funds to be provided to LEAs to start up an elementary counseling program. There's $250,000 added to the Necessarily Existent Small Schools program, which largely impacts the school districts. Let's see, there were $36 million added to the Voted and Board Guarantee program. Jamie is going to talk through House Bill 293, which is what distributes the most substantial part of that money. Largely that increases the guarantee programs for school districts. But as you know, those guarantees are part of the local replacement calculation. And so charter schools will start seeing the funds flowing through there in 2 years from now. So Jamie will go through the mechanics of that so that you're aware of how that works and how whatever implications that may have for your LEAs. There were $65 million added to the Teacher Student Success Account. The $36 million and the $65 million all kind of roll up into the Our Schools Now discussion. And I'll get into that in a little bit, and Jamie will cover that also. So this is just kind of an overview. There was $9 million added to the Enhancement for At-Risk Student program, which all LEAs, if you have at-risk students, participate in. And there was $7.5 million added to the Teacher Salary Supplement for special educators. This largely adds special educators with degrees and special education teaching assignments to the TSSP program. Teachers obviously have to apply, just like teachers who are eligible in other categories have to apply. So you as an LEA don't have to really do anything. I think that's all based on teachers demonstrating their compliance or eligibility. Really quickly, there's the recodification bills, HB 10 and HB 11, Senate Bill 11 and Senate Bill 12. I'm not going to go through them because they basically just move and realign all the code related to public ed. So if those of you who use the code have already noticed how it is a little bit easier to follow, but it's hard for me to make that adjustment of where things used to be and where they are now. So I guess we'll see next year how well memorization has gone. Early literacy, I've broken bills out instead of going through them. I know in the past we've largely kind of just gone through the bill book and talked about bills. I really wanted to hit just some of the high points. Obviously, if you have questions, please stop. If you don't think if there's a bill you really want to talk about and when we've passed through it, just let me know. We kind of categorize these into groups so we can talk about them kind of and how they impact students and impact LEAs. The early learning program, so Senate Bill 194 renamed the early literacy program. Essentially, this was the K-3 reading program. The bill itself made some programmatic changes. It didn't make any modifications to the financial aspects or the calculations of K-3. So they're more programmatic changes to provide some accountability and some performance measures related to the program. But as always, it was K-3, and I don't believe that we'll see any funding changes related to this one. Right, Jamie? She'll talk about it later. Okay. HB 380, the Utah School Readiness Initiative Program. This program already existed. It was being managed by the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. They didn't feel like that was the best role for that office, and so the program itself was moved to the Department of Workforce Services. We already have a lot of LEAs who are participating in this program. It's related to, I believe, after-school programs and preschool. I think it's preschool initiatives, not after-school programs. It's preschool initiatives. It does require, I believe, a match from public partnerships. I don't believe that the intent of the program has changed. However, the state agency that administers the program has changed. For you all, if you have this program, it's likely that you'll see some changes in how it's being administered. The Department of Workforce Services has a very well-established grants management and contracting process. You may have to fill out a little more paperwork than you're used to. I do believe that they require signed contracts, which may be something a little bit different than what management and budget did. So just be aware the program itself hasn't really changed, but how it's going to be managed has. I don't think there was any additional funding provided. The Board of Education will be developing an entry assessment for pre-K that will be required of all participants in the program, whether you're an LEA or whether you're one of the private partners that participates. So watch for some programmatic and implementation guidelines on that respect as well. Behavioral support and mental health. HB 132, the juvenile justice modifications. This is a bill, the juvenile justice modification started about a year ago. There's been a lot of refinement and discussion pertaining to how those modifications have affected the day-to-day and disciplinary actions in an LEA. In this respect, what happened in this bill is it allowed EARS money to be used or become like an allowable cost to address truancy. So if you remember, we added $9 million, or the legislature added $9 million to the Enhancement for At-Risk program. This program expands the allowable cost for those funds. So as your LEAs are writing plans and submitting those plans in this, whichever system EARS ends up being in this year, just be aware that you do have the ability to have activities related to addressing truancy that you can put in as part of your plans to better utilize those funds. Senate Bill 145, school funding revisions. This bill went through quite a few stages before it was finalized. In its final and passed version, it made some adjustments to the EARS appropriation, to the formula and the way that we calculate that. Jamie's going to go over that a little bit later, so I'll skip through that. But it adds some additional indicators, and so Jamie will talk about, you'll talk about that one, right? Jamie will talk about that one in a minute. Are there any questions so far? Okay. For the grants programs, I tried to make a list here of grants that were new or grants that have changed. HB 264, the elementary school counseling program, we already addressed that largely. That just creates a new grant program that'll be managed by the Board of Education. It will enable LEAs, I think it will be a competitive grant where you submit applications to receive funding for portions of elementary school counselors that I believe are new this year. It's a match program, and I think the intent is to provide some additional funds to start the program and then have the LEAs support the program themselves in the long term. And so, again, our staff are in the process of writing those rules and guidelines to enable you to know if you want to apply and to provide some certainty for those funds for the upcoming school year. So watch for that. You'll probably receive an email from our student advocacy section in the next couple of weeks, I think, pertaining to how they want to manage this program. HB 370, suicide prevention and medical examiner provisions. This increases, the Board of Education receives some additional funds to increase the amount of grants that we're able to provide for individual school prevention programs. I think largely the suicide prevention programs provide, I think it's like a $200 to $500 award for you to provide some training in your individual schools. We weren't able to get every LEA up to the $500 amount because of the amount of the appropriation. And so the program itself hasn't changed, but there are additional funds available to provide more of those funds out to you and to the individual schools. HB 308, the telehealth mental health pilot program. This is a pilot program that we administered through the Department of Substance Abuse. I think that's why, I think I did that. That acronym's wrong. I'm pretty sure I did this when I was pretty tired. It's not DAS, that's Administrative Services. DSA is the Department of Substance Abuse. They're going to be working on creating a pilot program. I anticipate that they will be sending out grant applications if anyone wants to participate in that program. I bring it to your attention because it is an opportunity to provide some behavioral mental health supports to the individual LEAs. However, this isn't a program that's managed by the Board of Education. So it's just something to keep in mind. You might receive some emails or notices from other entities related to these bills that passed during the session. The Intergenerational Poverty Initiative, HB 326. Right now, there were some funds provided. Potentially, Department of Workforce Services may be creating a grant program. We're not administering that program. This is in addition to the intergenerational poverty grant that we have going and the intergenerational piece that's related with the TANF grant and the preschool program. So this is like part 3 of that. Again, this is solely managed by the Department of Workforce Services. We won't be part of that, but it's something for you to be aware of, a grant opportunity that your LEA may want to take advantage of when they publish that. Senate Bill 202, the after school program amendments. This is a bill that created 2 grant programs. A portion of the funds are going to the Department of Workforce Services. This is the after school program one, to create after school programs for for-profit entities. A portion of the appropriation came to the Board of Education to work on after school programs for LEAs. So we will be putting together a grant program and sending out notification. I believe this is also coming out of our student advocacy services section. So watch for that. The appropriation, I think we only got about $250,000. So it's not a large amount, but it's not inconsequential. Any questions on grants before I move on? Okay, under special education, so there were 3 bills that largely impacted special education. The first one is HB 317, special education amendments. Effectively, there's a law in effect right now that indicates that when students turn 22, that they're supposed to be exited from the school in the semester that they turn 22. There were some concerns about how that impacted services provided to students, and so this bill was passed that allows LEAs to continue to provide services to students through their 22nd year. They can stay in the school year if they turn 22 during the school year, but then their services end, if you will. Something of note to notice here. So effectively what that means is when a student turns 22, you can allow them to stay. It also means you can continue to claim them in membership throughout the end of the school year. One thing to keep in mind, though, is federal special education law does not allow IDEA funds to be used to support students past their 22nd birthday. So our special education department will be working on whatever guidelines are necessary or required to ensure that we don't cross any boundaries with the federal funds. Statewide, this really only impacted about 70 to 75 students. It wasn't a significant amount. And so it's likely that whatever the implications may be are relatively minor. There were some funds provided in the special education add-on to kind of compensate for the additional ADM that will be generated by these students. But for largely most of our LEAs, we don't think there won't be a substantial impact. So just something to be aware of. I would encourage you to put a little tickler in your notes to talk to your special education directors about this. Make sure that they're aware to watch for guidance on this area. HB 233, we kind of already covered this one, the teacher salary supplement revisions. This adds educators with special education degree and special education assignments to TSSP. I know our staff are currently working on modifying the TSSP program to provide guidelines to those individuals who may qualify. Please just pass information along through your HR departments to your eligible teachers so that they know this is a additional salary supplement that they can apply for. HB 100, medically complex children with disabilities. For those LEAs, and I'm not sure if there were any charter schools that were participating in this program, effectively the Department of Health had worked out a waiver program that provided some state Medicaid funds for students who had disabilities but weren't quite Medicaid eligible. Effectively, all this bill does is extends that waiver and makes it permanent, which is a great thing for those who are participating in the program. Participation isn't mandatory. I don't recall seeing any charter schools that were participating on the list, but just so you're aware, if you are, that waiver is permanent now, and so funds that you were receiving for those students will continue. Any questions? Everyone still awake? All right. The Our Schools Now Compromise. Out of the Our Schools Now Compromise, there were 3 bills that were passed that provide some of the groundwork or lay some of the groundwork for the work that will be done this summer to finalize the Our Schools Now discussion. For those of you who aren't familiar, Our Schools Now was an initiative launched by businesses and other interested parties within the state to put an initiative on the ballot to raise income tax and sales tax to directly fund some costs to the individual schools. There was a compromise worked out between that group and the legislature that resulted in these bills. The first one is HB 293. I'm not going to steal Jamie's thunder because she's going to talk about that one, but that provided funds and froze the basic rate, made some other modifications to increase the amount of funds going into schools. HB 491 and HJR 20 provided a pathway for the legislature to put onto the ballot this November a potential increase of an increase of gas tax. So they're basically asking the legislature for or asking the public to raise the gas tax and special motor fuel taxes by 10 cents a gallon. What happens here, and again, Jamie will go over this, is HB 293 created that account I talked about, the Teacher Student Success Account. That's a restricted account. Only specific amounts of money go in there, and here at the Board of Education, we can only spend money out of that account for specific purposes. The legislature dumped some money into that Teacher Student Success Account, and our current understanding, which can always change with the next legislative session and with work groups that are happening this summer, is that if the motor fuel tax increase happened, additional revenue would be yielded and put into the state's transportation fund. Because revenue would go up in that fund, sales tax money that's being used to support transportation initiatives would go back to the general fund, and then the legislature would be free to take some of those sales tax funds and either make some shuffles with higher ed funding or put that sales tax revenue into the Teacher Student Success Account, which could then be distributed through whatever mechanism they determine. Most of that hasn't been officially worked out, at least to our knowledge. We haven't received any notice about what the plan is, and I think some of it all depends on whether the initiative passes. So it's kind of a lot of moving parts. Jamie will talk about how the first moving part functions this year with the flexible allocation and increased funds that were received. So does anybody have any questions or want to add anything? Do you want to add anything? Stay tuned. We're 100% certain that there will be work groups this summer to talk about the distribution formula for the Teacher Student Success Account. And we'll let everyone know if we hear about those. Let's see. Reporting. So everyone pay attention. This is really exciting. HB 227. How many people love filling out your class size reduction plan and report every year? How many people here like compiling it? Well, we don't have to do that anymore. HB 227 eliminated the class size reduction plan and your year-end report. It also eliminates the K-3 and Title I FTE report. I think when we looked at the effective date, it's May, so we were even more excited, which means we don't have to do it this year. Keep in mind, you still have to report class size reduction expenditures on the APR, but you don't have to fill out those reports anymore, which we're real happy about too. So, yay. Good bill. We like that one. Senate Bill 28, the Local Government and Limited Purpose Entity Bill. Write this one down on your list of things to remember. This bill requires every local government or limited purpose entity to register with the Lieutenant Governor's office. My understanding right now is this also includes school districts and charter schools. The intent of this bill was largely to enable the state finance and I think the state auditor's office to track limited purpose entities and determine who should or should not be reporting in transparency. Obviously, all of our LEAs are reporting in transparency, and so this really isn't a big problem for us. I am unsure how this is all going to work out. The bill also allows the Lieutenant Governor's office to charge a fee for this registration in order to maintain the system that they are having to build. They indicated that the fee would probably be somewhere around $100. Again, I'm unsure if public schools will have to pay. It was all a little bit vague. So we'll keep our eyes on that one and keep you updated if we find out how that's going to be implemented, or if there'll be any exemptions or changes for LEAs. I don't know if it'll be an annual renewal. It kind of feels a little bit like a state kind of DUNS registration. So there it is. So make sure to write that one down and we'll keep you posted on that. Senate Bill 198, Public School Disciplinary Action Amendments. This just requires some additional reporting related to disciplinary actions that happened at the LEA. The Board of Education had already provided some guidance and some requests of our technology staff for this reporting. I believe this, so I've indicated here that there potentially will be a modification to UTREX. here at the board, we would modify UTREX and also Aspire. But if you have your own student information system, this is one you'll want to keep an eye on as we push out information pertaining to potential changes and data that has to be collected. I don't believe it was very major. I don't know if it's just us defining better some of the fields we already have. Keep your eyes peeled, or make sure that your data stewards, whoever your data steward is, make sure that they're aware that this is a bill that they need to watch for any potential changes that come out of it. I believe we will be sending those notifications out through the data stewards group. Student and teacher data. So Senate Bill 207 is the student data protection amendments. Again, this could potentially also require modifications to UTREX, Aspire, and other student information systems. I believe that this bill was centered around ensuring that what we're collecting is in compliance with FERPA, that we have some other, I think it was a cleanup bill of some of the student data protection statute in the past. But I do believe there might be a couple of minor tweaks in UTREX. So again, flag that one for your data stewards and make sure that they watch for updates as we get ready to move into a new school year. HB 270, teacher employment amendments. So this bill actually requires the Board of Education's teacher tracking system to allow teachers to be assigned to more than one LEA. In our current system, which is Cactus, we cannot do this. Cactus was not designed to do this. So the implementation of this bill will probably be a year or so out in order to allow us to make some modifications and updates to Cactus so that we can make this change pertaining to the bill. It shouldn't really have any substantial impacts on you, but if you share educators with other LEAs, we're unsure what kind of funding implications that's going to have on teacher supplies, educator salary adjustment, pro staff costs, because those are all based on counts that we get out of Cactus. So we have a few things to work through as we work towards trying to make that modification. I believe the implementation date was about a year out, so I think we have time to work on that one. Any questions, comments, jokes? Yes?
Let me scroll back. There was, you mentioned something about, was it suicide prevention? One of the House bills. And Vaughn just told us they were deleting that code because there was no more funding. Is that?
We're deleting a separate column on the APR for it.
Oh.
Up in the other state program.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
So for those that were listening, Vaughn indicated that we won't be deleting the program. We're just deleting the separate column, and that will show up in other state programs on the APR. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else? School funding. So we probably already covered this pretty well today, but Senate Bill 124 extends the budget deadline amendments. So not this year, but next year. Budgets will be due on the 30th. We're actually really grateful for that. We struggle sometimes to get the basic rate calculated in enough time to provide all that information to LEAs. For LEAs that have to set tax rates, I think this is a lot more cumbersome than it is potentially for charters, but that gives you a little bit more time to get your budget submitted in a timely manner. Senate Bill 144, local funding education technology. So this bill, I believe, goes into effect in January. Largely impacts the districts who have levies, but it allows them to use, goes into effect in May. It allows them to use their levies for debt and capital projects. Technological projects. Senate Bill 232, school transportation amendments. This bill provided a $500,000 appropriation for LEAs that qualify to receive additional funding for to and from transportation. Eligible LEAs are within counties of Jamie's going to talk about it. As counties in a certain class that have a certain poverty level. Right now, I'll just let Jamie talk about it. She's going to talk about it in a minute. She gets mad at me when I steal her thunder. So let's see. Did I miss one? Okay, I knew I clicked too many. HB 228, Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Training Amendments. This was a training requirement that was already in effect. The modification that occurred during the session was the frequency and a potential requirement for you, the LEA, to have to do a certification that you completed that training. It switches the training to a semi-annual training. My anticipation is that if we require a certification, it would probably be in the assurances document. We haven't confirmed that just yet, but that seems a likely place. Senate Bill 137. Amendments related to government records. This bill, whoever your records officer is within your LEA, you should probably all have one. Please make sure to let them know about this bill. It makes some minor modifications to GRAMA. It talks a little bit about what protected meetings are, and it makes some modifications for electronic and email communications. So make sure that your records officer reads through this bill and understands the requirements related to the modifications that were made. Senate Bill 139. This one's actually, I'm going to use the little red pointy thing. No, I'm not. This one doesn't have a red pointy thing. I'm just going to point to this one. For all of you who buy things, and you all do, this is actually kind of a big deal. It didn't look all that super amazing during the session. However, this allows anyone to make an unsolicited proposal to your LEA, and it requires you to respond and tell them whether you want to buy their products or not. Why that may not seem like a big deal, because we all are subject to public procurement, we have to respond to those unsolicited proposals. The bill, I believe, if I remember correctly, does allow LEAs to make a policy about how you're going to manage or participate in this new requirement. So the Board of Education, for us, this is a huge deal. This will require a significant amount of time and energy. I believe that we'll be trying to make a policy that describes how and when we're going to evaluate those unsolicited proposals. So my anticipation would be we'll be modifying our procurement rule within the next month or two. Watch the board meetings for those things. If you want to follow the policies or practices that we establish, you're welcome to get some ideas from there. Question? Yes, I bet May 8th. So that will go into effect in a month. Yeah, that goes into effect in a month. So we'll probably be frantically working on trying to get that rule in place as quickly as we can. HB 236, Public Education Reference Check Amendments. Again, this is a requirement that was already in place. Basically, the statute just indicates that when one LEA asks for a reference check from another, that you're supposed to respond. This bill now puts into the requirement that you must respond within 20 days. I think it's 20 business days. I'm sure you probably all have lots of things to do. There aren't any penalties in the statute for not responding within 20 days, but there is a requirement in the statute to respond. So, Senate Bill 148, Public Education Enrollment Applications. This bill put into statute some minimum requirements for what your enrollment applications have to include, and it was so substantially impactful, I didn't even leave myself notes. So just make sure to read through it and see if you have to modify any of your enrollment practices. I don't remember anything major that caused anything that I was concerned about, but you might want to read it. Senate Bill 122 is pertaining to bond elections. This doesn't pertain to charter schools, so I'll skip by it. Senate Bill 176, student internship liability. So if you receive or participate in the Utah Risk Management Pool, if you're part of risk management as your insurer, this just clearly defines what a student internship is and what risk management will and will not cover. It's a practice that was already in place in all of our districts, but it just provides some clarity in the rule. So if you have internships and you're covered by risk management, have whoever's in charge of your insurance take a look at that and make sure that you're comfortable with the changes that are being made. Or the definitions, if you will. Let's see, Senate Bill 76, Commercial Property Tax Amendments. This provides a property tax exemption for state and local governments if you're leasing your facilities. So I think, I'm trying to remember, I think that we determined that charter schools fall under the eligible entities. So if you're paying property tax on properties that you lease, you might want to take a look at this. I can't remember what the implementation date is on this one. January 1st of 19. I think as we study this a little bit more and figure out from the school district perspective, it will result in potentially some decrease in revenue for them. And so that's why I have it on here. For you, obviously, if you're leasing facilities and paying property tax, I'm not sure if that extends to your leaseholders or not, but maybe they wouldn't have to charge or there would be some exemptions to property tax if it's a leased facility. So take a look at that. I'm not sure. I think you have to be the lessee, not a third party. So I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to interpret what it says. So take a look at that and see if it applies to you. Specifically for charter schools, Senate Bill 70, this is kind of a big one. Human resource requirements. This requires every charter school to have at least one designated human resource individual. And it requires that individual to receive training on human resource related policies and procedures. In our discussions about this bill during the session with the Department of Human Resources for the state of Utah, they indicated that they'd be happy to create a list of trainings or documents that would be available for all the charters. But it does require a designation of a person, and it requires this training every year. So I think that's something that's new. We probably need to, we'll work in the next couple of months to figure out how that will be implemented. Yes?
Is that the HRA, Senate Bill 70, is that just for startups, or is that?
It's for everyone. Yeah. Yeah, it's for everybody. The State Department of Human Resource, DHRM, said that they would be happy to provide a list of vendors or conferences, or I think they also indicated that they'd be happy to consult, but they would charge a fee. I'm not sure how much of the initial conversation that we have had with them will be what actually happens, but we had a lot of conversations as it was being implemented. This one actually goes into effect May 8th as well. So let's see, this is exactly what it says. So you have to establish human resource management policies and ensure that at least one of the school or district's employees or another person is assigned HR management duties and receives HR management training. And it requires DHRM to provide certain entities with HR management advice and training recommendations. So largely you'd have to formalize your HR policies and make sure that someone has the proper training. I don't believe so. I can't always speak for authorizers, but I don't think I'm interested in collecting any new information. So I don't always get to make the calls. So it doesn't require a report that we have to report on. So, and there was no funding provided for that either, just in case you wondered. So Senate Bill 173, the State Charter School Board Amendments. This modifies the makeup of the Charter School Board. Previously, there were two representatives that had to have finance experience, I believe. The bill modifies that down to one, and then takes that saved member, if you will, and puts their expertise into the digital teaching and learning and innovative kind of realm. So it just modifies the makeup of the Charter School Board a little bit. HB 313, public school revisions. This requires the Board of Education to set standards for charter applications and compliance. So it requires the Board of Education to set some minimum standards for what's required in new charter school applications. I believe that also extends into compliance areas as well. So I would be looking for the Charter School Board and the State Board and the Institutes of Higher Education and potentially school districts who have authorized charters to be having a lot of conversations about policy this summer. And in the very near future, I believe we have about a year to get all of this stuff in place. So we'll be working on that. It also provided some funding for financial operations, which is us, to hire someone to help and facilitate in charter finance. So we'll be working on recruiting somebody to fill that role as quickly as possible. HB 231, charter school funding amendments. Really, this bill doesn't make any substantial changes to funding. It just gives us at the Board of Education a decision-making tree in the event that local replacement funding is not adequate. So there have been conversations in the past few years when we've underestimated students or haven't estimated enough to pay local replacement, who we would actually pay. It talks a little bit about ensuring that your projections are accurate and that you stay within, I believe, the caps. Doesn't it talk about caps? Yeah, they're maximum caps. And so basically it just establishes a funding rubric or guidance if we run short in funds. So, and how we would apply that. HB 245, charter school proximity amendments. I think this is the one that adds like up to 2 miles. You can give priority to people up to 2 miles, but not 2 miles. I'm not sure how that, I am unsure how that impacts you, but I would just thought I'd let you know. You can read it if you're really excited. Basically just adds the word up to a bill. So I'll leave it up to you to figure out if you care. HB 28, the retirement system amendments. If any of you, I know we do have a few charter schools that participate in the Utah retirement system. This bill just requires you to provide records and books to URS and their auditors on their request. which seems like you probably should have already had to do that. And it also requires you to maintain a list of employee exemptions instead of filing it with URS annually. So it sounds like there's some report that you had to file in the past that maybe you just have to keep now, and they can request it when they need it. So if you're participating in URS, watch for some guidance there. HB 147, retirement forfeiture for employment-related offenses. This does apply to everybody. If you have an employee, or if you're notified by some kind of prosecuting agency, this also requires the district attorney's office, the county attorney, the state attorney, state auditor, anyone who's investigating or pressing charges against a public employee to notify URS. The bill actually, or there's existing statute that indicates if you're convicted of stealing from a public entity, you can forfeit your retirement. So this just implements a required reporting paradigm for those who participate. Yes? It's a really great question. So the question for those listening online was, does this only pertain to those who participate in URS? I'm going to say no, but I'm not an attorney, and I'm going to read it and check, because it does require the state auditor and the county attorneys and state attorneys to report to URS. I think that probably URS will be setting some guidelines pertaining to what their reporting requirement is. I think it would probably hinge on the definition of public employee. And so I will write that down and see if we need to provide some further clarification. That's a great question. So anybody else have any questions? I think that's it. Okay, thank you so much. If you have any questions, again, you can download this bill book. You can email it, pass it around. It has just basic information. As always, go back and read the real bill, because that will tell you what they really meant and not our interpretation of it. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Rebecca, the rest of the time over to Rebecca, and I think Jamie's going to help out with some of the requirements of our new grant system. I'm going to excuse myself. My dad's getting released from the hospital, and I'm his ride. So I'm going to go home.
Thanks, you guys. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Natalie. So Jamie is passing out some documents that we will be. Can you guys hear me? Oh, I actually have to put it in my mouth for you to hear me. She's passing out some documents that we will be going through in this presentation. These documents are also available online on the Board of Education website under the Finance tab, under the Grants Management System. In fact, Jamie's passing out the paperwork, but I'm going to take over her laptop for a second and show you where those can be found. So I'm gonna let you come back and take over your laptop again. So State Board of Education website under Finance. And then on the right, you'll go to Utah Grants, which is the name of our new grants management system. And then under the Grants Management System tab, there's an overview, and then there's also some documents. These are the documents that we're going over today, but they are available to you online. Just by way of introduction, the Utah Grants System will replace the Utah Consolidated Application, or UCA, or also any manual way of collecting applications, submitting reimbursement requests, financially monitoring our awards. It's going to be kind of the end-all one system to manage all of the the Board of Education grants. Not only that, but the state is implementing this grants management system. We are the second agency to implement this system, and by far the largest. The other agency has 1 or 2 grants, and the Board of Education, I believe we have 136 or something. It's a huge undertaking. So a couple of key things that we'll need to note that are going to change for this upcoming year. Reimbursement requests. All reimbursement requests are going to be handled in Utah Grants. I should probably follow my notes. There will be a period of time that you will not be able to submit reimbursement requests as we are implementing the new grants management system. So you need to be aware of this date, July 9th. That's the last day that you can submit via the old systems, either the UCA or an emailed or a mailed invoice or a reimbursement request to USBE to receive reimbursement in fiscal year 18. If you don't get your reimbursement request submitted by July 9th, you're going to have to hold on to it and submit it through the Utah grant system. That will likely be September. So that means you've got a few months that you may be not receiving payments on reimbursable grants. So, right. So that said, if you have appropriate expenditures that you can bill ahead of time, that you can bill before July, by all means, get them submitted, get them turned in. So yes, you're encouraged to submit your application or submit your reimbursement request as soon as possible. Programs with unused funds will need to be manually set up in the Utah grant system. So what USBE needs to do is take a period of time and say, what are all of the available funds that have not been expended? What have you not submitted reimbursement requests for? Determine any available balance and then set those up in the Utah grant system. That will take us a little bit of time to do that, but once it's set up, we will then need to turn it back over to you to complete a detailed budget within Utah grants. So we will set up the initial allocation amount for the carryover, but you will need to actually go in and submit by categories, so salaries, benefits, supplies, those type of categories for each of the grants that still have existing funds. Reimbursements cannot be submitted until all approvals are complete. So your budget needs to be set up, it needs to be submitted and approved by USBE before you can complete a reimbursement request. Hence the September date. It's going to take us some time to get through all of that. The timeline will depend on how quickly you get in your budget revisions and the application for those carryover funds. USBE commits to make that turnaround just as quick as we can to get those available for you to submit reimbursements. But it will depend on you, program managers, finance, all working together to quickly get through and get those all approved. Any questions thus far? The timeline or the? Yes. Yeah, so as far as the workflow goes, the green represents things that USBE is doing, and the blue represents things that you need to be doing. So as we convert all of our existing programs, we have to set those up. So first we have to determine what amount is left over, get those set up in the system, load those carryover balances. Then we turn it over to you to complete that detailed, organized budget. And then we will approve that budget or send it back to you for revision. Could go through a couple steps there. And then you can submit reimbursement requests. Question? Yeah, please.
So what you were just talking about is existing programs that we have already submitted budgets for. Right? And so what you're telling me is, if I'm understanding you correctly, that any money that we don't draw down before July 9th is going to be a carry forward. Again, we've already submitted a budget for it. So you're going to implement that, input that carry forward into the new system, and then we will be required to resubmit our already approved budget for approval. Is that what I'm hearing from you? For the carry forward funds only. And this largely applies to funds that we're already doing through UCA? Sorry, I have the microphone. I should tell you guys what the answer is. The answer to this is all these questions are yes. Okay. One system that houses everything. So here's my follow-up question to that is, most of us fill out 6 to 10 grant applications in the consolidated application. But you had said that there's like 137. And I assume that those grants, and I'm making air quotes, include everything that we see on our allotment memo, right? So that would include the special education add-on and other things that we don't currently submit applications for. Are those going to be part of Utah grants that will now need to submit specific budgets for every line item on our allotment memo?
Yes and no. Yes to, these will all be within Utah grants and managed through Utah grants. But as far as completing the budgets, I'm going to let Jamie speak to that point.
Okay, so one system to rule the world is what we're talking about. So this one system will have all of MSP in it. It will have all of your grants that are currently in the UCA. It'll have every grant that you currently are filling out a paper reimbursement form. Pretty much anything that shows up on your allotment memo, you will be able to log into Utah Grants and see a dashboard of everything that you're getting funding for. So a one-stop shop. So for MSP, do you fill out an application for MSP? No. So are you going to have to now? No. It's going to operate in the same manner. The only things that are MSP that you will have to fill out a budget for is like K3, which is already in the UCA. If you get the early literacy grant, that'll be in the UCA. EARS is in the UCA already. Digital teaching and learning. We are trying to put everything into the grant system. So anybody, a director, a management company, any employee that has the ability to log into the system can log in and see where all of their stuff is at. Where's my reimbursement request at? Where is it in the process? When am I going to get it? When is it going to show up on my allotment memo? Has my application been paid? Contact information. Everything will be in this one system. So as we end the year on July 9th, if we don't have a reimbursement for you for all of your current reimbursement programs, we will cut those off, determine what your carry forward balance is. When the system comes live, USBE has to go in and enter by program, by LEA, all of those amounts into the system. That then gives you the ability to then go in and say, oh great, I have $20,000 left in my BTS grant. I'm going to spend that X, Y, and Z. I put in those budgets and I send it to USBE, we approve it, you can send in your reimbursement request or USTAR or any of those programs. That's how it's going to operate. Any questions on that? Yes, lots.
Start over here.
Mine got answered.
Yours got answered. Who else? Okay.
So this may be a little premature, but it sounds like we're talking about previous year's funding. I'm just wondering about fiscal year 19. Okay. All right.
Other questions so far? I'm grateful for the interaction. Thank you.
Will this eliminate the monthly allotment memo? No. Okay. Will Land Trust and USTAR be in this?
Was there? School Land Trust is not in here because it's not carryover funds.
If not,
Because your School Land Trust is paid out in one lump sum. You already have your 18 amount.
I just want to know, is the UCI still going to be available to look at during this time period?
Great question. Our contract with the UCA goes until the end of September, I think. And we're trying to figure out a plan to see if we need to keep that open past that date and time or not. We'll let you know for sure.
So jumping ahead just a little bit, someone noted that the list of the programs is on the back side of this first sheet. We are not quite ready to turn on Utah Grants to collect all of the applications that you're currently starting to complete. So the plan is, right now, is to continue to do applications, to complete applications for federal fiscal year 19 programs in the same way that you're currently doing them. The exception to that is we have two programs that are going live when we turn the system on in May. Those are Perkins and IDEA. Those are the two programs that we will be able to submit and collect applications in Utah Grants on Go Live. Everything else we're going to collect manually or through the UCA for this funding cycle, but then we will turn everything over and need you to complete an additional or complete the budget request again in Utah Grants. Got it? In Utah Grants, so that we can submit reimbursement requests through Utah Grants. So did you guys follow all of that? Applications will still be done in the existing system. Whatever you did last year, you'll do that again, with the exception of those two programs. However, you'll need to log in, complete a budget, submit that budget for all of those new programs. So let's talk about how fiscal year 19 programs will work. Okay, so all reimbursement requests will be submitted through Utah Grants. Therefore, the system has to be set up, the grants have to be set up, everything needs to be approved. You'll be able to apply for 19 grants, I think we hit that already, the way that you're currently doing them. But then you'll be required to do detailed budgets. Award letters will be issued through Utah Grants and will be available on Utah Grants. So if you lose your award, the letter, you can just log in and find it. We'll have all of the information that you need right in Utah Grants. It's a great place for a repository for our award letters. Reimbursement requests cannot be submitted until the budget has been approved and the award letter has been issued. And the timeline to submit and receive reimbursement within Utah Grants also depends on the final allocation notifications and the dates that the budgets are submitted and approved. So walking through this workflow, we set up the program, and then looks like I have a wrong color, darn it. Okay, well, forget the color idea. Then we load an allotment amount. So if this is a formula grant, we'll load what you're eligible to receive. You complete the detailed budget, and then we approve the budget and application, issue the award, and then you're able to submit a reimbursement request. We also have competitive awards. On those awards, you get to say how much you think you need. We can either approve, decline, negotiate with you on those competitive awards. So another question.
Will you define detailed?
Detailed budget by category. So when I say detailed budget, I mean salaries, benefits, supplies, travel. Right. Perfect. So thank you. I'll try to define that.
So, sorry. Just to recap. So any funds in 17 and 18, if it's a reimbursement request program, we need your reimbursement request by July 9th. If you can't get them to us by July 9th, meaning you've incurred eligible expenditures at that point in time, I don't want you to break any rules or laws, submit those to us so we can get those paid on the period 13 allotment memo. If we don't have those in our hands by July 9th, you'll have to wait until the system is up and going to then submit your reimbursement request through the Utah Grant system. We're hoping that that's all ready to go by the 1st of September. Lincoln.
In the event that we can't meet the July 9th deadline, maybe because we haven't yet paid out teacher salaries, which are going to be paid in July, right?
Right.
Okay. So we don't get the reimbursement on period 13 comes in. Ought we to still recognize that revenue that maybe we don't get until October now in FY18? Or does it have to be reflected as FY19 revenue, even though it's paying for FY18 expenses?
So you're going to have deferred. I'll walk because I haven't walked enough today.
Get your steps in.
Your expense will be in the 18 fiscal year, and you will need to book a federal receivable in the 18 year. Then when you receive the money in 19, you just relieve the receivable, and that puts it in the right place.
Theoretically, you shouldn't have to wait, past June 9th for payment of salaries because you're on an accrual basis.
There are some programs that some school districts, and I'm assuming charter schools are the same way, that you're paying expenditures or salaries up and through June, but your payroll's not running, or that could cross fiscal years, right? So we have some issues with.
As long as you accrue the expense,
Right.
you still have it on your books.
Correct. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely accrue them. Yes, yes. No.
There shouldn't be a delay in that.
Right. I'll just keep walking around.
You may have accrued the expense, but it's not eligible for reimbursement until you have distributed the cash. It doesn't matter that it's accrued. You have to disperse it. And if there's more than 72 hours difference between when you get reimbursed and when you disperse the cash, you have to calculate interest and pay that back to the program. So I wouldn't apply for reimbursement for things that you've accrued but have not yet paid.
So every year we have to electronically upload the assurances and compliance documentation in order to get the grants. How's that going to apply this year?
Okay, so who remembers what we did for assurances for 18? Nobody?
It was impactful.
Wrong. We did a fillable PDF this year, right? So you went through, none of you should have done this because it should have been your directors, unless directors are here, went through and filled out your assurance. The director digitally signed it and then hit submit, and it just took it and put it into our electronic database, right? So we didn't have to actually upload them into the UCA. Because of timing with the system this year, we are going to do that again this year. So your directors should be receiving another fillable PDF form to fill out for assurances. In 2020, there will actually be an assurance form in Utah Grants. And we'll have federal assurances and we will have state assurances, not mixed anymore. And so in your applications, there are some program-specific assurances, and like special ed has some, CTE has some. You'll fill those out with your application going in 2020 going forward. Special ed does have their assurances in their application for 19. Any other questions? So I lost my screen.
Right. So drawing your attention to the dates on the bottom of that form, and Jamie will get that up on the screen. Again, the July 9th date, very important date to get all of your reimbursement requests submitted for fiscal year 18. July 27th is when you'll actually receive your payment for those requests. August 6th is when we will have available carryover balances to us. We will know what you have left over in any of your fiscal year 18 or earlier programs and start loading those into Utah Grants. As soon as those become available, we will get those to you to start completing the categorical budgets, salaries, benefits, 100, 200s.
And we'll start with the big federal programs first because we know of the deadline. So if you've got carryover funds in 17, we'll be getting those up. I mean, we're going to work our way prioritize, and as soon as a program's up and active, we're going to let you guys know it's up, active, get out there, fill out your budgets so we can get reimbursement requests processed.
Probably already get an email about this, but training for the system, I assume is either available or
Training is coming. We have our vendor that we've worked with that has developed the Utah Grant system is currently putting some training together. We're going to shout that out first to the CTE and special ed directors and all of the business folks. We're going to get you guys all trained first and then start doing section by section. So CTE, special ed, and then do Title I's, bite them off in chunks, and get everybody trained. But yes, training is coming. It will probably be May.
Initial training will be May, but definitely we need to make sure everyone is trained before we start submitting budgets. So June.
Oh, we're getting there. We're getting
Yeah,
there. Gosh, hold on.
Approvers are actually first. Perfect. So best case scenario, you could start seeing payments through grants that are in Utah Grants on August 30th. However, that's best case scenario, given that you've submitted your carry forward budget, you've gotten that approved, you've been able to submit a reimbursement request, gotten that approved. Best case, you can start receiving payments August 31st. Really likely that's going to be the end of September before you're able to start seeing payments through Utah Grants. Question?
Maybe I'm confused on the dates. I thought you said the system wasn't even going to be available to us until September to enter anything.
No. The system, we are actually going live on the system mid-May. However, you will not have carry forward balances or anything until August, with payments becoming available likely in September. So you'll actually be able to start getting in and playing around and looking at things, looking at your programs in May. And we will have a live program when we do our trainings also, so that you can get in and start seeing your programs. Any other questions about the dates or the timeline? Okay, we're going to, so these are the programs and how they're going to be handled. This is the back of your sheet. Most of our programs will be just like you did last year. So for the federal fiscal year 19 programs and applications, do what you did, unless you're applying for Perkins or IDEA funds. Those will be in Utah Grants. Everything else we will then convert over to Utah Grants. So we need to talk about access and user roles. We are currently collecting information to make sure that we have all of our LEAs set up in Utah Grants and all of our users set up in Utah Grants, so that when we go live, you can get in and you can start functioning and doing your work within Utah Grants. This is not like the UCA. The Board of Ed actually pays for licenses in this system. So we need to be careful that we request only what we need, but request what you need. We are currently thinking on average about 8 per LEA. If you don't need 8, don't request 8, because that ends up costing all of us money if we have to pay for licenses that we don't need. We will also be periodically checking to make sure all of those licenses are active and getting back with you to terminate licenses if needed. So a couple of things that you need to know about your access. So we have a 2-step process for LEAs for all subrecipients on grant applications. So submitting a grant application requires 2 people. Reimbursement request, budget revision, progress reports. There needs to be a creator. So one person that's actually putting all of the numbers into the system, creating the application, creating the reimbursement request, and then there needs to be an approver. And the approver actually looks at what the creator created and then says, yes, that looks good, and pushes the submit button, and that's when it goes to USBE. So going through the little workflow, we've got the creator, approver, and then it comes to us. The approver we need reserved for individuals that have authority to legally bind the entity. So it's my understanding that many charters have management companies or utilize the services of management companies to help them to do some of this paperwork, reimbursement requests, so forth. The management company individual can be considered a creator. They can go in and enter the information, but someone from the charter that has authority to legally bind the institution needs to be the approver on that transaction. So the typical titles, an approver would be your school director or executive director, whereas the creator could be the business management company or business manager, program director, accountant, those type of individuals. Every LEA needs at least 2. So we need at least 1 creator and at least 1 approver. The approver has the same rights and privileges that a creator does. So if you have 2 individuals within the organization and you kind of want to switch that up and say, I want to create this program and have you approve it, then you create that program and I'll approve it, that's fine, but it can't be the same individual. So you can't create a transaction and approve that same transaction. So when you're requesting user access, don't request a creator role and an approver role. An approver lets you do both. Creator does not ever let you submit it to USBE. Yeah.
You said we need 1 creator and 1 approver.
1 creator, 1 approver.
But then an approver is also a creator.
Correct.
Can we therefore have
You could therefore have 2 approvers if you need to.
no creators?
Yes.
But a management company employee cannot be an approver.
Correct.
So that's the only caveat there.
Right. Okay. We also have a role for a key point of contact. The key point of contact receives all of the formal communications, gets copied on award letters. That's the person, typically superintendent, director, that is our key point of contact. We need 1 person to serve this role. This person automatically gets approver access. So just keep that in mind that we do need 1 person with the key point of contact. Even if you have multiple approvers, we need to know the one that's head honcho. Okay, request for users. We're asking you to complete a SurveyMonkey request to get us all of the information for the users so that we can get that set up and ready to go before the system turns on. Jamie, will you take me to that link? On your document, there's a hyperlink. You can actually, if you get online, you can hyperlink to it. It gives you a little description of what it is that we're doing. We're collecting the users and the due date of February. Hope you all got that. April 27th. And it also has my contact information so that you can call me if you have any questions. All right, so just go in and say next. First thing you need to do is complete information for your LEA. What's the name? If you know your school number, complete it. If you don't, just leave it blank, not a big deal. And then enter who your key point of contact is. So first name, last name, position title, phone number, email, basic information. Again, this individual only needs to be entered in the survey once, but they're going to automatically be given the key point of contact approver role. Okay, only one person per school, one person per LEA should serve this role. Then you can, oh, Jamie's doing it, look at that. Oh, Utes, I like it. Okay, and then go ahead and click the next button. Oh, question, yes?
It says that this individual will get the communication. Will the creator also get that communication as well?
Yes, typically the creator also receives that same communications, but the approver key point of contact receives more. Award letters
Are addressed to that key point of contact. So the award letter should be the director of the charter school, just like it is now. That's who the award letter is going to, because that's who we're awarding funds to.
So different transactions have different email notifications. The award letter actually goes to the creator, the approver, and the key point of contact.
I'm just wondering what communication would go to the approver that couldn't go to the creator.
Set it up so if something is rejected, if something has a comment on it,
Right.
if anything gets sent out, that it goes to all parties within that LEA, so everybody's aware.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead and, another question? Okay. Click next to enter each of your users. There's a question or a place available to enter as many as 10 users here. We don't expect that you'll need all 10, but go ahead and enter that same information. So first you need to click the drop-down box whether this individual gets a creator or an approver assignment, and then enter all of the key information: last name, first name, position, title, phone, and email address of that individual. So any questions on users? If you're the key point of contact, do you also need to put in approver? No, that's assumed. So you only need to put your name in once on that first screen. You don't need to put it in on the second screens. Yes?
Okay, so that first screen that we did, is that key contact?
Yes, that's the key point of contact approver.
So we do the first one for the key point of contact, and then this page where we do the users, one creator, one approver.
Technically, you have one. Can you guys still hear through this? Technically, when you fill out the front page, you have one approver already.
So the first one we do is this one here is the approver.
This is the key point of contact approver. So this counts as one of your approver.
So if we just have two in our school,
Right.
I would put the director here, and then I would be a creator patron.
Correct. You just need two. The first page would be your director. The second page would be you as a creator. You're done. Right. You don't need to enter that director twice. As if you've entered them on the first page, you don't need to enter them multiple times. Yes.
Can you have two approvers?
Yes, you can have two approvers. You can have as many approvers as you need and as many creators as you need, as long as you have at least two individuals. You have to have someone approve the transaction.
If you have the main contact as an approver, and then you have another approver that's separate, that main contact, you don't have to put them in every time.
No.
So at least by next Friday, which is April 27th, we need at least these two roles filled out for every single LEA in order to get our vendor to be able to load up everybody into the system to give you access so you can go in and create your profiles, so then you can have access to the system to start logging on and doing stuff. So that's our first huge deadline. Next Friday, we need all of your information.
Perfect. I think that's it. What other questions about Utah grants in general, about timelines, about user roles, any other questions that you may have about the new system? Yes.
Just to give you an example, so we have one individual that is completely in charge of creating everything for K3 reading. And then we have someone who's in charge of Title I. I mean, they're different individuals. When you put those different individuals in, can you put which program they're in charge of so that they can't go into every single program?
It will not be program specific. However, once you have a creator that's tied to a program, then that creator gets the communication. So if they've completed the application, they get all of the communications on that application. If they've completed the reimbursement request, they get all of the communications on that reimbursement request. But any of your creators, any of your approvers can go into any of your programs. We cannot limit it to program. And actually, that's a good thing, because then you can have coverage. And anybody can do what they need to within the programs. But the transactions still have to be approved, so they're always going to be going to the assigned approver for that program. Does that make sense?
So on the approver side,
So again, I said for each program, but it's actually each transaction. So we define transaction by transaction, who is the creator and who is the approver.
okay.
Thanks, Brett.
So what about a situation where the director is a employee of a management company? Would it need to then be, that person would it then only be a creator, and then the employee who's the assistant director would then be the approver?
Help me with that one, Jamie.
Correct.
You have a board chair, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have, is your assistant director an employee?
Yes, of the school.
Does he or she have the ability to obligate the school?
I think so, yeah.
So then they can be set up as an
Okay, thank you.
or your board chair.
Okay.
Board chair's not an employee. Can't if they can legally bind, yes. Okay.
Yeah, the board chair can bind your school.
I apologize if you've already answered this question. So, can an approver, such as the key point of contact, also be a creator on a specific grant within?
Yes, they can, but they cannot approve
somebody
their
else
own
just
things.
has to.
Somebody else has to approve them. Somebody else in the approval, with an approver role, has to approve that transaction. You have the same rights as an approver as you do with a creator. They do not have to sign up for both. So you automatically get to create things if you're an approver. You just can't approve your own things. We're all getting our steps in.
So let me just walk through an example. For a specific program, you have to submit a plan saying how you're going to utilize the funds and what type of academic targets you're going to meet, what your goals are. So frequently you have two people working on that. You have somebody at the administrative level who's helping to create the academic targets, and somebody who's in the budgeting and finance helping to complete the financial part. If those are your two people and you're both in there helping to create the document, you have to have a third approver? So frequently it's the director at a charter school. Frequently the director is the one who's writing the UCA plan with all of the academic data, and then the business managers are helping to assist the budget component of that. So if the business managers are a creator, and especially as a management company, we can't be an approver. And then the director is also helping to create the academic portion. The director can't approve it because the director helped to create it.
So either the management company individual or the budget individual or whoever, or the accounting staff should enter everything in and send it to the approver to approve.
I don't think you want the finance people writing the educational.
Not writing. Either it's provided to them and they put it in, or you're going to have another approver.
Okay.
Have another assistant director or a board chairperson or somebody else help out.
Technically speaking, the person that submits the application is considered the creator, or the person that submits the reimbursement request is considered the creator.
So the director could type the academic portion in, the business manager could submit the application, and then the
Right.
director could approve it.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. You have my contact information. If you think of questions after today's meeting, please feel free to reach out, phone or email, and happy to answer any of your questions.
How about we take like a 10-minute break real quick while I set things up?
While you're setting up, I have a very quick question that I don't think applies to many other people.
Okay.
So we, like Lincoln and I have logins to the UCA to all of the schools because we can't share the logins. So they can only have like 8 logins. So that means we're going to use up 2 of them plus our business manager, so we use 3. Okay.
That's why we
And then
figured
they
that.
have a CTE, a SPED.
So if the individual gets in the system one time a year, I don't want to really spend a license for them if they're not really like actively using the system.
Yeah.
So I think you may have to reevaluate business practices and figure out who's doing what, just because of the now
Yeah.
pay for license aspect rather than it was a free portal. It's just for anyone
Yeah.
to get in and do whatever they wanted in the system.
See, and Lincoln helps work with new directors to get them through the process in the beginning. And then I help to make sure our business managers are properly allocating programs. So I do a quarterly review of that. Well, it's halfway through the year after everything's approved and then quarterly.
Right.
But, so I don't know how we would minimize that.
See, and there
You
might
know?
not be, but
Without
that's why
like
we
giving up some type of a, let's review and make sure it's right.
That's right, and it's not like someone can't export things out of the system, reports and stuff to give to other people to say, hey, will you review this? That's totally an option. Like we're setting up a lot of dashboards and hopefully a lot of good functions in reporting, so anybody could log into it and say, hey, where are we at with special ed now? Where's this reimbursement? Where's
Yeah.
Where's our pending at in the process to be able to run a report and say, here it is. So we're trying to put more functionality. Are there give and takes and different things between the UCA and Utah? Sure there are. With any system there is, but I'm trying to figure out, like, can you submit more than one reimbursement at a time? You can in Utah grants. Can you in the UCA? No. So there's things like, give and take, and I thought that was probably more important than some other things, because that's
Yeah.
like my number one complaint that I always hear is, I have to wait till the end of the month, and then it's due in 5 days, and it's really quick turnaround. Okay, we've tried to fix that, and so now you can see what are pending, what are approved to be paid, kind of see them walking through the process now in
Right.
the new system. So
So currently in UCA, it's usually just the director and us. You mentioned CTE and SPED. Are they submitting currently reports elsewhere that will now be in here, so they will need a
So
login?
they'll have an application, like right now, CTE handles all their stuff outside of everything right now. So when CTE comes into the system, if it's the CTE director that's actually doing the things,
Then
I
they'll
know,
need it.
then they'll need a login. So it just kind of depends how much access, like how often are they in the system. You'll just have to kind of evaluate business practices, and we'll have to go
Yeah.
from there.
Okay. I'm just looking at if they only get like 8-ish, then how does that work if we're stealing 3 of them so that you and I each have a login and our business manager? And if they only get 5, we'll have to figure that out. Yeah.
Hi. So, I guess I'm trying to figure out what I put myself in as, because right now the way it works is, like I said, whoever's in charge of K3, they actually do the academic part of it. Then I go in and I put in the actual finance, the budget. But I'm also the one that goes in and does all the reimbursements as well. So do I put myself in as a creator
So
and
if
not
you're
an approver?
If you're an approver, you can be a creator too. So approvers can go down, creators can't go up.
So I can still,
So
even if I put the budget in and I ask for the reimbursements, I can still be an approver. Because like
you just can't approve the reimbursement request that you created. Somebody else will have to approve it.
Oh, so when I put the
So
reimbursement, like say I did
when
that
you
yesterday.
act, when you act as a
Right.
creator, somebody else will have to approve your creations. Does that make sense?
Okay, so as long as I have Jake.
Yep.
So we can both be approvers. But when I actually ask for the reimbursement, then he's got to approve it first.
Correct. Anything you create and hit send to go to the next approver step, you can't go back in, and the system won't allow you to go back in and say, oh yeah, I approve that. It'll say, you're the creator, you can't approve it. So Jake would have to log in and approve those creations by you.
Okay.
So reimbursement request,
So as
whatever.
long as I have both of us as approvers and then all the others as creators, then I would be fine. Okay.
Yep. Hey, Lincoln.
I have what I think is a simple question. Dirk,
I love simple questions by
Dirk
you.
at Pacific Heritage is leaving the little bugger, and he won't be the only one.
So no, I figure we're gonna have lots of turnover. Like
Yeah,
always.
so we're gonna set Dirk up, right? Like, we'll do that now. And then what? What's the process by which
So we can
identify
kill a
new person?
license, and so Rebecca's gonna handle.
We
she'll-
just email Rebecca
Yep.
saying this? Okay.
Yep.
The Survey Monkey, and then we pay for license fees, right?
We pay for license fees.
Oh, okay.
Which
well,
is why I
we'll
want
do
you to be very carefully
Well,
looking
I-
at and evaluating how many
I've
licenses you need.
identified 4, so not 8. That's supposed to
That's what I figured. I figured most of us will not
3
be
or 4.
at
But
that
you do
level.
need to make sure you've always got backup on
Oh,
something.
definitely. Oh, yeah. We,
And
yes.
right now, I've got 4 people in mind
Yeah.
that should be involved in this
Yeah.
right off the bat. I'll make sure we get it
Yeah.
on Monday.
No, I agree.
Yeah, a lot of work's gone into this. This was developed by a corporation.
Yeah, we have a vendor
And
that's been doing
and
it.
then the state has, through the finance department, contracted for this. And then
Yeah.
you're widening out now, as I understand, to the USBE.
Yep, we're the second
There's no
state
sense
agency to come on.
There's no sense reinventing the wheel. You know,
No, the legislature wanted one grant system so we could log in and see everything. So
Rebecca did a great job working this out and explaining it. And so you could
Yep.
just assume, what their
She's
answers were
awesome.
going to be because they were alluded to before. Did she come to you just to do this? Were you hired? She was
yeah,
hired
we
just to
hired
do
her
this?
for
That's
the
what-
grant system. Yeah, she rolled out the grant system at IHC.
Oh, from IC. Can't get much bigger than that
She's
stuff.
got a lot of grant experience. I super love her.
Well, there's such a thing as grant origination, and normally the people that are great with grant origination are not the good with grant management, or grant reimbursement, or grant economics. Usually but when you find someone that's great and doing both, then you're really, really lucky. Especially
I have my water. No. I'm gonna go. I'm actually gonna fill up my water. No, Brett. I'm really good. Tell me what school you guys are from. All right, let's keep going so I can get you out of here at a decent time. All right, Brett and Vaughn wanted me to remind you that your indirect cost sheets certifications were due on the 15th, April 15th. So if you haven't turned those in yet, they are late. And your audit responses are due by the 30th of this month, just FYI. Is that it? All right. I'm going to go through the minimum school program updates. If you have questions, please raise your hand. I'm going to, hopefully, we're out of here in another hour. There we go. Okay, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 194. So if you noticed on the legislative estimates book and then also on your charter school summary, K-3 Reading Improvement Program was renamed to the Early Literacy Program. Senate Bill 194 also made some changes to the actual plan. So you do have to develop a growth goal, and if 60% of your grade 1 through 3 students don't meet those growth goals, then the State Board of Education is going to step in and provide some additional support for those schools. We also need to develop a digital platform to help out with this program. And the other caveat is that the new Senate Bill 194 also allows the State Board of Education to use up to 3% of the funds appropriated for administration here at the board. Those are the biggest changes with early literacy. Any questions? Everything else, the formula, everything else stays the same. Enhancement for at-risk. For fiscal year 19, the appropriation is now just over $38 million, which it got growth plus $9 million. Thank you to Senator Fillmore. Senate Bill 145 changes. So in addition to poverty, to mobility, to EL students and low-performing students on state assessments. Those are the 4 original risk factors. We also have 2 additional risk factors, homelessness and chronic absenteeism. So now there will be 6 risk factors that go into the creation of the formula for EARS. Also, the other caveat with EARS is currently, no matter how many risk factors a student has, the student still counts as one. In the new formula for fiscal year 19, a student can have up to 3 risk factors, and each of those risk factors count as 3 now. So if a student has all 6 risk factors, they're capped at 3. But if they have 2 risk factors, we're now counting them twice. If they have 3, counting them 3 times. So the funding is now targeted towards more of those LEAs that have higher student population with that have these risk factors. So you'll see a redistribution and a reshuffle of the funding, but with the $9 million, we're hoping that it doesn't really harm anybody for fiscal year 19. Also in the bill for fiscal year 2023, the Public Education Subcommittee is going to evaluate the program at that point in time, see whether we continue it, we amend it, or if it needs to be rolled into the WPU value. Any questions on EARS? Yes.
Will those calculations be complete so that
they're done. They're in your legislative estimates right now. Yep. Yep. This calculation for fiscal year 19 is in your estimates right now. Any other questions on EARS? Okay. Transportation for rural school reimbursement, Senate Bill 232. This program, or this bill, now allows either a school district or a charter school that's in a county of the 4th, 5th, or 6th class that also has at least 65% of their students qualifying for free or reduced lunch and has provided transportation for at least 5 years, to and from transportation for at least 5 years, to now qualify for reimbursements for transportation. So this is a brand new thing for charter schools. Right now, the board has to create a rule to try to figure out how to do this, because for districts it's easy because I'm already collecting transportation data for school districts. They submit an A1 every year for eligible to from expenditures. For charter schools, how many of you think I have information on transportation? I have nothing for charter schools. Charter schools don't have boundaries. School districts do. There's a lot of questions that will need to be answered by our board in order to come up with a board rule in order to do this. So more to come from that. If you are a charter school that qualifies for each of those 3 criteria, which I think there's not very many of you, yeah, I know. Pay close attention. The board will be creating a board rule and trying to figure out how we implement and actually manage this program. So more to come on that. I'm going to go over HB 293 and try to explain it to you. Even though it doesn't have a direct funding effect for you for fiscal year 19, I think it's a benefit that you understand how it works. Because in 2 years, you will be getting these funds in your local replacement. So right now, school districts, prior to fiscal year 2016, levied a basic rate, which is this very bottom box. For fiscal year 19, that is projected to collect $333 million. In the 2015 session, Senate Bill 97 passed, in which we added a revenue target on top of the original revenue target for the basic levy of $75 million. Those 2 rates together now create the minimum basic tax rate. That rate is estimated to be 0.001498. And why that rate is important is because with HB 293, we now created a floor with the equity pupil tax rate, which basically says if this rate here, the minimum basic tax rate, is less than 0.0016, the difference between those 2 rates becomes the rate that generates funding for this equity pupil tax rate. Right now, that's estimated to generate $36 million for fiscal year 19. Why is that important, you may ask? Because this additional funds here are going to fund school districts for their voted and board local levy programs. And any state guaranteed money off of those programs go to increase local replacement for you guys in 2 years. So if this gets funding, in 2 years it'll roll to you guys and you'll see a bump in your local replacement amount. Also with 293, we created another value, which is the WPU value rate. It is calculated by taking the estimated number or the actual number of WPUs for the basic rate, which is like, I think 800 and something thousand at 3311, let's say for this year. I times those two numbers together and it gives me like 2 point something billion dollars, which is the cost of the basic program for fiscal year 18. I then say, what's the new WPU value for fiscal year 19, which is 3395. I take those same WPUs, times them by 3395, I get a new cost to the basic school program. The difference between those two costs times by the percent share of the basic levy, basically what does the locals generate for the cost of the basic program, then becomes the amount of money that generates this WPU value. I know it's complicated, I'm sorry. Basically, all four of these values together become the new basic rate that all school districts will charge every single person in our state. So yes, your property taxes are going up. So that's estimated right now to be 0.001669. Okay, so let me just go over this one more time. So as assessed valuations increase, what happens to the basic rate? It decreases, right? So as our assessed valuations have been increasing over the last few years, it's been pushing the basic rate down. So the gap between the floor and what we expect is increasing. And whatever this gap is what's going to create the funding or generate the funding for this equity pupil unit tax rate. So at any time, if we have another recession or we go to war or 10 million other things happen and assessed valuations start to tank, which way will the basic rate go? Back up, right? And if it ever goes above or is equal to 0.0016, it will not generate any funding for the equity pupil unit for that fiscal year. So which means that if we ever happen to have a year when that happens, your local replacement won't increase in 2 years after that. Does that make sense to everybody? I know it's a whole bunch of funness, and it's even funner when you get to fiscal note it. But those are all the values. So I tried to put together more examples. So the basic levy is the $75 million, which is Senate Bill 97. That goes right now into a restricted account called the minimum basic growth account. The equity pupil unit tax rate is going to a new restricted account called the local levy growth account. This is what's going to increase the voted and board levies up to 20 increments for school districts. This is what will help you guys out in 2 years. The WPU value rate is the money that's going into the teacher and student success account. That was a compromise with Our Schools Now. The funding formula and who is actually going to get those funds is still undetermined at this point in time. So that's the only caveat, and I'll show you where those funds actually ended up. We'll come back to that. So for flexible allocation, if you notice on your allotment memo or on your charter school summary in the book, there's 2 columns for flexible allocation and 2 rows on your summary. I did that because I wanted to make sure that the ongoing dollars of 7.788 in flexible allocation, you guys can kind of set your budgets accordingly with those ongoing funds. And the $65 million that also was put into flexible allocation, we're treating that as one-time funds for fiscal year 19. So I had lots of LEAs ask me, well, am I guaranteed this amount, or are they going to take it during fiscal year 19? No, it's there. We have it. I just want to say that, yeah, after fiscal year 19, I am not sure if it'll stay here. So let's see, what way do I want to go? So our little blurb is treat those probably with one-time expenditures for fiscal year 19 until the legislature, through their interim meetings this summer, decides exactly what they're going to do with those funds.
I do have a question whenever you think it's a good time.
You can ask.
So the weighted pupil unit went up 2.5%.
Correct.
And then another 1.5% of that value went into this school teacher and student success fund, which you put in flexible allocation.
Which the legislature put in
Fine enough. Okay. Okay. While whatever the rules are written for that new program, right? Okay. So that's fine. So that's a functional increase, especially for most charter schools, of 4% on the WPU. Okay. I thought that's all there was, but you're showing an additional 18.6 because all that came from my wonderful bill 293 is generated $18 million more than even I realized. Is that right? I mean, I just thought that 18 million was part of the 2.5 inside the WPU, and you're telling me it's extra money. No, I knew that. This is good times. This is why the legislature has a good staff. And not to mention the state board staff, which is by far superior. If anybody at LRGC is listening, I'm totally snowing her. Okay, so anyway, that's so really the functional increase of the weighted pupil unit is something like 4.5%.
So, well, if you take, yes, because technically $31 million is about 1% on the WPU. So half of that is roughly, a little more than, So let me just go back to recap. So this WPU value that was created in HB 293 dumps into the student and teacher success account. What the legislature did is 1.5% that was sitting already in flexible allocation. $46.5 million was sitting in flexible allocation as a holding place on the last day. It didn't find a home. So they left it in flexible allocation. Well, technically, how the bill writes is they took this money and they appropriated it to this account. So now this account has the full amount in it, the $65 million, and then they appropriated it out of teachers and student success program into flexible allocation. So that's how we're getting these two amounts that equals the $65 million with the 7.7 ongoing gives us almost $73 million sitting in flexible allocation right now. So yes, you have that money for this year. Is it ongoing? The one-time column, I'm going to say no because I don't know yet how the formula is going to function and who they're giving it to. So until that's decided, I'm still putting the caveat of treating this as one-time expenditures for 19. Which is why we're trying to be very transparent on which money. Is this a set dollar amount right now? Does flexible allocation ever change throughout the year? Who can answer that? Throughout the fiscal year. Does this number stay constant throughout the fiscal year? The answer is no. How is flexible allocation funded? It's based on total basic program WPUs compared to the state's total basic program WPUs. So when mid-year adjustment hits and I true up everybody's numbers, does your basic program WPUs change? Yes, which then rolls down to flexible allocation and your flexible allocation amount will change. So you're not counted to this to be exact dollar amount, but it's a pretty good estimate right now. Any questions on that piece? Do you guys want me to walk through how 293 affects school districts with their voted and board programs? Okay. That just takes out a chunk. Perfect. Okay. Fine. If you want to later, give me a call. Because of the legislature also decided to reorganize programs this year in the minimum school program. So in the book and on your district summary, you'll notice that there are new categories and new programs within those categories. So the first category is the normal related to basic programs, but they've added local replacement and charter school admin costs to this subcategory, which means the revenue code for these two is now 3,200. So this is for fiscal year 19, okay? The next program, they took special populations and they changed it to focus populations. They've added early literacy, so K3, early intervention, and early graduation from competency-based education. Those are the three new programs. They now have a revenue code of 3,300. We now have a new category called educator supports. This has your educator salary adjustment, TSSP, teacher supplies and materials, effective teachers in high poverty schools, and the new elementary school counseling program. For those programs, the revenue code is 3,400 now. Last but not least, we have statewide initiatives, which rounds out everything else. School Land Trust, the library books, school nurses, dual immersion is now changed. It used to be critical languages and dual immersion. It's just dual immersion now. USTAR, BTS, digital teaching and learning, and we actually lost field trips. Field trips after fiscal year 18 are no longer a USBE program. So all of these have the revenue code of 3,500. So you'll need to fix these in your chart for fiscal year 19. I will send my presentation to everybody so you have it. Oh, any questions on that? Okay. Like I said, state capital field trips was transferred to the State Preservation Board starting in fiscal year 19. So if you have reimbursements out for this program, again, we need to have those by July 9th because after that, we no longer have the program. So that one's like drop dead date. Which also means that because we don't have the program anymore and you apply for this program through the Preservation Board, you probably will be receiving a check from them. Okay, my list of other matters and concerns. In your legislative estimates, you should all have a budget for digital teaching and learning. I was so proud of myself of getting that calculated on time. I accidentally linked it in and put it into your budgets, even though you may not apply for the grant. Sorry. So if you are not applying for digital teaching and learning, ignore that line. If you are, the budget set in there is your possible estimate amount. As schools drop out of the program, that amount will just go up. Okay? I get emails and calls saying, "Hey, Jamie, I got this payment. It was a weird time. It was like the second week of the month. It has no information, but it kind of came the exact same way that the allotment payments come. Can you tell me what it's for?" Because we are on the state's financial system now, any state agency that sends you a payment will go through the same way that we send you payments. It won't show on the allotment memo, but it'll show, you'll get that little email that says you got a finite payment, but it didn't come from us. And because it's another state agency, I don't have access to go into the accounting system and figure out who sent you that payment. So you have to call the state's disbursements office at this phone number, and they will be able to tell you what that payment is for and who sent it to you. We're trying to tell all agencies like the STEM Action Center and other agencies that we're all trying to get everybody to use the same vendor code is the one that we've established for you guys, and also trying to make sure that they put enough detail in the line that shows up on your memo so you know who it's for or what it's for. Because just getting a random payment in the middle of the month is not helpful to you guys. So I'm sorry I can't be of more help other than to point you in another direction. The third thing is the projection process. I have had about 4 calls so far as soon as I sent out the legislative estimates and attached my WPU calculation sheet from various LEAs, either, "Hey, my projection looks really low," or "My projection looks really high. Who put that in the system? Where did you get that from?" So I just want to go through again how important the projection process is. When your directors go into UCAP system from the charter schools in September this year and enter your projection for fiscal year 20, that is the projection that you are saying is my best estimate that I think I'm going to have. If I'm increasing grades, increasing a campus, if whatever you're going to do, decreasing grades, all of that needs to be documented in that system with your best estimate of what you think your October 1st count will be in 2019 for fiscal year 2020. Why is this important? Because when I take those numbers, or when those numbers are given to me out of the UCAP system, we go to the Common Data Committee and we say, here's what the charter schools think they're going to have for October 1st. They'll go through those line by line and they make adjustments. They ask us questions. Why did they jump so much? When I have documentation that says, oh, they're getting a new campus, they're expanding into a new grade level, that helps us so they don't change your projection. We try really hard to keep your projection as close as to what you guys have submitted it. I'm not always successful, but we try. When those approved CDC projections are done, approved, those go into my budgeting process in November, and those go to the legislature so they can set the amount of money that the basic school program needs to have in order to fund the expected amount of kids. So if you are off on your projection, I am off on my money. See the direct link? So please, 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 please make sure that you guys are using that process to the best of your ability, that your directors are going through with you, sitting down, making sure that you're all on the same page with what you think, how many kids you're going to have for that next school year. Because when July comes, you will be paid off of that projection from July until October. I won't true it up until November. So please make sure that those are accurate. Any questions on projections? Okay, my last soapbox, which we've already kind of talked about because Vaughn stole my thunder. Bank account changes. Please make sure I get them sent through the email. I don't want my bank number sent through the email to somebody else. Please use the Move It site. That is secure information, and I don't want it in an email. So because we're now using the state's accounting system, we get the paperwork, we have to verify it. We send it up to this, the state representative in state finance. They have to go through and update the system and approve it through their chain of command. It now takes a lot longer than it did before. So if you need your bank account changed, we need that information probably about 2 months ahead of time. Because if we get it in the month in which we're trying to already create payments, I can't go back and change the vendor on those payments. They're gonna go to wherever that account is set up. So we need about a 2-month lag before you actually wanna change your account. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions on this? Guess what, I'm done, woohoo! You guys have any other questions? Nobody, everybody just wants to go home, it's Friday afternoon. Okay, thank you guys.
Yes, I know. I always have questions, don't I?
No, you're fine.
Okay. So I had down, we got approved for the 2.5% and what the local replacement would be and that. But then I guess they had some kind of a charter. My principal went to a charter meeting.
Okay.
And was saying that we actually were going to, between the 2.5, and I guess he says, well, we should